So I will now introduce our speaker for today. So Ron Crawford is joining us. He is a native Montana with a passion for the outdoors, and his book, Twisted Tales, Growing Up and Old in the Mountains of Montana, is the result of an adventurous life spent in and around the capital city of Helena, Montana. So he is going to sort of go with some of the stories that he shared and the process that it took to write this book. And if you want to purchase it, Allie is selling the books in the back for afterwards. So take it away, Ron. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Howdy, folks. Glad to be here this evening. I'm not a public speaker, never have been, but here I am, 72 years old, and never thought I'd be here doing this. I'm not a writer, but here I am with a book that I had published about a year ago or so, and I have another one in the works. So don't ever give up, even though naysayers might try to persuade you, you can't do that. You're not equipped for that. I never gave up. I just attended my 55-year class reunion. Yeah, graduated in 1970 from the best high school in Helena Senior High. Anyway, there was a memorial there for all the folks that had passed on, and it gave me time to reflect on how fortunate I am to still be here. It humbled me. 2011, I had heart bypass surgery with complications. I have stents, I have bypasses, I have a defibrillator pacer implanted with wires going into the chamber of my heart. An X-ray of my chest looks like a junkyard for used heart implements. Thank God I have them. I didn't know a lot of those kids that I graduated with, all the Catholic kids that came over to Helena High that year that closed down the Catholic high school. And so I didn't have a lot in common with those guys. And also I didn't participate in sports in senior high. I had earlier on. Didn't join clubs. My passion was the great outdoors of Montana, even at a young age. I went to school, I had a job, but my weekends were mine, and I wanted to be in the outdoors. On foot, during those years, I was either planning the next excursion into the outdoors or thinking about last excursion. Got me in trouble in school more than once. It's just the way it is, just the way it was. So my life has always been about the outdoors of Montana. A little bit about me. I was born and raised in Helena and spent most of my life in the Helena area. I say that because when I was about 4 years old, my father, being a chef, wanted to be a chef in one of the big casinos in Las Vegas. Las Vegas was just a pup. They were just coming of age. This is in the mid-50s. So the folks loaded up everything of importance to them in the back of a pickup truck and a Cadillac car. My sister remembers this. And while they were chasing the dog down to get him loaded up, us three kids snuck in the back seat of that caddy. I'm not so sure we were supposed to go along with him, but we snuck in there and off to Vegas we went. Dad got his first cooking job down there. He went to a local bank to cash his first payroll check. While he was going into the bank, a bank robber come running out, stuck a gun in his guts and said, "Take me to your car, you're gonna be my getaway driver." Well, our dad was a wily little man, knocked the gun away and went running into the bank, leaving a trail of blood behind on the floor. He'd been shot through the foot and hadn't even realized it. Well, he healed up, we moved back to Montana. It wasn't so wild and woolly here after all. I did hear him tell a story about how when he was a kid back in Dakota and Minnesota country, he was a getaway driver for a couple of older kids going around doing bad things sideways to the law. I think specifically trying to rob a bank. And they got caught. And the two older guys, I think, did time. Dad, I think, spent time in swampland, Minnesota, wrangling a team of horses in the winter there. I think maybe that's what they told him he was going to do, just as a young kid, skidding timber out of those swamps in the winter in Minnesota. So anyway, I went through schools here in Helena, graduated, could say, from the best school. Went to Missoula for a year, came home. I wasn't going back. It wasn't for me. $50 bought me a year at Votech. That's what we called it then, trade school. Machinist welder. Before that school year was up, I was offered a position at a local manufacturing company, Armor Metal Products. I accepted it. I ended up staying there 33 years, 27 of those years in management. I learned at a young age, my number one responsibility for working for anybody is to make that man as much money as I could every day. And if he was a just, honorable man, he would pay me back accordingly. I did, and he was. I ended up staying 33 years at Armor Metal Products. I had my own business as well at times, Crawford LLC. I had cattle. I was married into a ranch family. I wrote this book, and I did a lot of other things. After working about a year at Armor Metal Products, I went out on a blind date. Turned out to be a blind date with a tall, willowy blonde. Strawberry blonde, ranch curl, oh yeah. I guess you could say we hit it off all right. 3.5 minutes later, we had to get married. That's not right. That's not right. Not 3.5 minutes. It could be. You ask her, and that's probably pretty close. Anyway, 3.5 months later, we had to get married. And so we did. Yeah, we got married 3.5 months later, and we lived life large, built a home, have 2 children, grandchildren. It was a grand life. You know, we didn't have kids for 7 years after we got married. That was our plan. Friends and family would say, "What's going on? Who's got the problem? Have you been tested?" No. No, we came to answer that question by, we see these little creatures you guys call children. We want to make sure we get it right the first time. We're still practicing. And that was, what a grand life to be young and in love and full of life and passion. So that's a little bit of my life, just growing right here in Montana and living life large. So many different things over those 72 years. The reason this stool is here and I'm sitting on it, I'm going to read the beginning of a story here. There's a reason for that. I was in Toastmasters for a while, and they say, "Oh, you got to stand behind a lectern and to be correct." Here's why I have the stool here. This is a story from relativity and the other theory of relativity. E equals mc squared, black holes, parallel universes, and my favorite ion propulsion systems. And there you have it, everything I know about each one of these subjects and embellished at that. There is absolutely no relativity between any of these subjects and what I'm going to talk about today. What I'm going to talk about are the events in my past that are directly relative to why I brought this stool, and today I'm going to sit down on it. Throughout my life, regardless of my launch platform, the human body is incapable of sustained flight without external forces applied. The results are always the same. Gravity takes hold with the body crashing back down to Earth every time it was tried. The resulting injuries, the long-lasting results of these attempts are why I'm sitting on this stool to tell this story. It's a lifetime of having fun and not wasting any time at all. And the best launch platform I had throughout my life, I'm going to go to the back of the story, was a horse. And I had horses for over 20 years. And I want to say Reno was his name. Reno's ears pinned back. Bill, the old cowboy sitting on the fence, was already picked that up as horse and rider make tracks around that little round pin, leaning in heavy with the fence post flashing by. One loop around, just starting the second. Reno said, "That's enough." Bogged his head down between his front legs, stiffened straight ahead with a half twist with his body, kicked up with both back legs, threw me forward off balance, catching myself with an arm on his neck as he reared up a sharp squeal, telling of his displeasure, throwing me back as I made one desperate grab for the horn, missing it cleanly. And there I was, laying across the back of my horse, Reno, looking up at the big sky of Montana. And I heard a little voice come into my head saying, "Ronnie, this is where you need to kick your feet out of the stirrups." One more buck and I was airborne. And the story goes on, and just one example of experiences with horses. There's stories in here. This one here, the day Grandpa killed Grandma. Now, don't take offense to that. This is really a story explaining how important the woman is on the family farm, all the work that she does. She holds that ranch farm together with all the things she does. And I'll just leave it at that on that story there. She was helping Grandpa out in the field, sorting cows. She pushed cows down a runway. Grandpa wasn't getting the cow cut out. He threw a stick at her, bounced off the cow's hard old head, flew up in the air, and came down right where Grandma was standing, knocked her flatter than flat. Grandma was starting to come to, twitching and moaning, and Grandpa's arms bringing him back to reality. "Come on, Grandma, wake up. This is no time for you to be taking a nap. Shake it off," he said as he helped her to her feet, walking around a little to get her balance. "Next time, pay attention, for Pete's sake. We still have to cut out that old cow." Now, during all the commotion, the gate being left open, the old battle axe cow had sorted herself out, standing alone in the side pen that Grandpa had worked so hard to get her to go in. With the gate closed, the cow taken care of, the corral gorp still dripping off Grandma, they headed back to the house. "Here, Grandma, take this other bucket of milk from milking out Butter, the milk cow. After all, a bucket in each hand will balance out the load for you." That's how Grandpa was, always thinking of Grandpa. She took the bucket and staggered off toward the house while Grandpa headed over to the shop, whistling a soft cowboy tune to himself as he walked along. After all, he knew without a doubt, sooner or later, he would make the old battle axe see things his way and go where he wanted her. "Oh, come on now. You're just being mean on me now. I already told you." "Not Grandma. The cow. The cow." So I tried to do that in my stories. I tried to lead the reader in one way, mislead, and then come back to the true point of the story. Make fun of everybody, especially myself. Lighthearted. I intermix my faith through some of these stories where I can. It was just a blessing to grow up in Helena here, 50-mile radius of Helena. I've come to understand we have some of the best outdoor recreation opportunities of anywhere in the lower 48, bar none. Winter or summer, horseback or afoot, it doesn't matter. I've done my best to take them all in. From a kid in high school with a backpack that outweighed me for sure, later on to horse trips back in with a pack animal along with your camp. They're all just as blessing beyond belief, all of it. A younger brother came home and he said, "Hey, let's all walk into Heart Lake, one of our favorite places in the Lincoln backcountry." I think there was 11 or 12 of us. Some of us were in our 70s, some little children were in backpacks. So we all walked in there for the day. We built a fire. There was snow. It was not in July, and there was still snow in the air. It was flying. And we let the kids fish, and they caught really nice, I'm not sure if they're cutthroat or brookies out of that Heart Lake. We spent the day there, then walked back out. What a great memory of the whole family going in there, fishing, and being together, helping each other out. The camaraderie. Hunting camp. You go down to a hunting camp. That's one of the main blessings of that also, is the camaraderie you build between people, helping each other out, like-minded individuals that are out there on the land, the resource, not just to go out and harvest animals. It's bigger than that. It's a way of life out here in Montana. That's why I stayed in Montana. I didn't have to go anywhere else. With all those recreation opportunities, 50-mile radius of Helena. A lot of folks, they graduate and they go here and there and everywhere for their work after they're educated. I didn't have to do that. I was able to stay right in Helena and follow my dreams wherever they would take me every weekend. It was a true blessing. My kids grew up here. My son, the oldest, I asked him, well, what do you want to do when you graduate from high school? Well, we have 2 chemical engineers in the family. I want to be a chemical engineer. Okay, where you want to live? You know, you're going to live somewhere else, not in Helena. Probably not in Montana, maybe. Not many chemical engineer jobs in Montana, unless you create your own business. He says, well, you know, that's true. I'd rather come right back here and live. So he got his degree in civil engineering. He has his own business now. He passed his professional engineer's test right away and started his own business. The second time it succeeded. The first time it didn't. Not any fault of his or his young partner. The older partner just passed away at like 48 years old from a massive heart attack. So they tried again, though. They persevered. They didn't let that dream go away. Now he's very successful in his own engineering business. My daughter graduated. She went to school at Votech in office and health, and she works for Montana Nurses Association. She's raising her family in the same house she grew up in on the ranch. Her husband runs her grandma and grandpa's ranch. And so my grandkids are being raised in the same house I raised my kids in. What a blessing that is to go home to that house. I sit off into the corner and I've seen, now my grandkids are teenagers, but as I watch them grow in that same house my kids grew up in, what a blessing that was. Just to sit back and take it all in. The little things in life, folks, that mean so much. Not what we take out of life, but what we give back to life. It's whether it's a kind word to a stranger or a teller at a grocery store. You never know how that affects somebody in their day. And you're not supposed to know. We're just supposed to do that. We're supposed to be that support for people. It's just a kind heart. The Spirit of Jesus in my heart. That's, I guess, all I can say. There's over 60 short stories here. There's about the old timers that I ran into as a kid. The Koski family were instrumental. He was the most kind and decent man I ever had the privilege of getting to know when I was a young guy growing up. He lived in the mountains all his life as a sheep herder trapper. He was retired when I got to know him. He was a prospector and trapper. And the code that those guys lived with in the woods, helping each other out. And there were several of those old timers that living around in the mountains up on Stemple Pass in the Lincoln area. Back in those days, in the late 50s, 60s, it was a pleasure to grow up then. My folks led me with loose reins I couldn't have done it to my kids. I didn't do it with my kids. I didn't give my kids those loose reins like our folks gave us. And I'm so blessed with all the adventure. We had an old 52 Willys Jeep, 4-wheel drive. It had a PTO winch on the front. And when you were big enough to look through the steering wheel and reach the pedals, the clutch and the brake, Dad taught us how to drive it. And he let us take it up to the cabin. Snuck out of town. None of us had driver's license. And he taught us how to use that PTO winch. So it was our go anywhere hunting rig, and the rig us guys got to take the cabin in the summer. And our big old brown dog we had was a Chesapeake named Brownie. He was with us all the time. Those simple things in life never leave. It was the things we learned, the stories that were told and relayed to us as kids sitting around that old one-room cabin of John Koski. He'd be sitting there with his stogie, sucking on it, and telling stories of his childhood in Montana up on the Front Range, Geyser, Belt, Bab, as a sheep herder, and the grizzly bears. And there was one story I guess I can relay. He was up there. It was nighttime. They have a sheep herder's wagon. It's a covered wagon on a trailer where he lives. And dog was barking, carrying on crazy, and there was a full moon. And old John slept in the nude, according to John. And he was sleeping outside on the prairie. It was just what he did. Dog was raising Cain over along this timbered ravine, so he gets up, puts his boots on, only his boots. He grabs his rifle, and here he is, walking around, stalking the bear. The bear is in the timber in this gulch. His dog is keeping even with it, he figures. And here's old John back here following the dog. In the middle of the night, moonlight, buck naked. I don't know if I could do that. That was just one of the many stories that John told us over the years that we would sit and listen to until it was time to go back up to our cabin in the middle of the winter, and it was just cold, black, dark outside. We didn't have a flashlight, my brother and I typically. And so we'd put our coats back on and head out the door. And in our cabin, it was maybe a quarter of a mile away, but I stuck close to my big brother, even though he was teasing me all the time and giving me a bad time. I didn't have any option. He was my protector. We got back to the cabin there and locked the door behind us, and we had candlelight. And throw off our shoes and jump in bed. We didn't clean up. We didn't undress. And pull the covers up over your head. Because in the middle of the night, there's a little rodent that likes to come out in the middle of the night called mountain pack rat. He'd scurry up the outside of our cabin and then run around up on the roof playing, probably laughing, but playing, and there's no way you could go back to sleep. So here we are in the middle of the night, my brother with a little 22 rimfire. I'm holding the flashlight, kind of the one that's about half bright, and get it just right, and you see the rat up there on the ridge line, and you got to get him off there. You got to do something because you're not getting back to sleep. Anyway, that was pretty scary for a young kid, 10, 12 years old. Just so many different things like that we got to do and did. And a blessing to live in Helena, Montana. Don't ever take it for granted. We had relatives come up here from Las Vegas. As kids, their parents brought them up, and they took them up to our old cabin. And as they became adults and came back, the first thing they would remind us of how dark it was at our cabin at night. When the candles were blew out, of course, they were from Las Vegas. It never gets dark there. City never sleeps. But that they remembered that the rest of their lives, how dark it was up there in the middle of the night. So like I said, it was a true blessing to live this life. I'm glad I had the fortitude and the stick-to-itiveness to put these stories together. My wife got tired of hearing me talk about it, and she finally said, for crying out loud, do it. Get this book put together. So I had been keeping notes for a long time, and finally with her persuasion, got it put together. I'm not a computer person. I hand wrote every one of these stories at least 3 times. And my sister-in-law put them on the computer, got it back to the publisher. Publisher I chose from the East Coast. They had a commercial on television in the middle of the night that I couldn't sleep, typical, wake up middle of the night. So I chose Covenant Publishing, and they were a challenge to work with for quite a while until I got a different representative. And I finally talked to the president of the publishing. She got me hooked up with another representative, and that was on Friday. Monday, all the problems were taken care of, and it was a deal. So just talking to the right people and not giving up. If you have a passion for life, pursue it, no matter what age. That's what I tried to do. And there's, like I said, there's over 60 stories here. I don't know if you want me to read any more of them, but it's all about that kind of a life. Ranching, horses, hunting, the blessing it is to have all this right out our back door. Never take it for granted. Any questions? Yes?
Where was your family cabin?
Up on Stemple Pass, about 5, 6 miles, 7 miles up from Lincoln. We were on this side, and the Koski cabin was over here, just about a quarter mile away. Yeah, my folks bought the cabin in around 1950 or 52 from Johnny Stemple at Stemple Pass. Stemple Pass is named after his granddad, I believe. So, yeah, and so there's a lot of history around Stemple Pass from the Stemple family. Had several working mines up there in that time. His grandpa did. So, yeah, Johnny Stemple, my dad was a chef here in Helena. He managed the food department in Placer Hotel. Johnny was a baker for him. He'd come in real early in the morning and bake all the fresh bakery goods for the day, every day. So that's how my dad got to know him. Johnny said, I got this little cabin up in the mountains on a mining claim. Well, got to get rid of it. How much do you want for it? Well, they made a handshake deal, and I never heard what Dad paid for it. But it was the best thing that ever happened for me, because I loved that part of the country, that cabin. I spent as much time as I could up there. It was a true, kept me out of jail, I'm sure, many weekends when my buddies were running around town causing trouble. You know, that was fun, of course. Trouble is fun when you're a teenager. But kept me out of jail, and I'm not so sure about my buddies. I think they were sideways a lot of times. But I spent my energies this way. So.
Do you still have it?
We don't have that cabin. That cabin went away because it was on a mining claim. It wasn't a patented mining claim. So we went down the road and bought 2 acres and built another family cabin. The family, we pitched in, we all built it. And we were just up there last week. We're going to go up there again. It's a little bit of heaven on earth. It morphed in from a hunting cabin to a retirement cabin. I put underground sprinklers in. We have power. We got a pond. We really rough it. And it is so nice. We have a big wood stove in there, plus a propane heater. But just a small little, it's like 26 by 30 with a half a loft. We can sleep about 12 people if we have to. Beds, solid beds upstairs. It's just a place where family congregates and count our blessings. You bet. Just last week, my neighbor showed us a photo of 4 grizzly bears. So a sow with 3 cubs that are pretty good size. They're not 2-year-olds, but they're this year's cubs, but they are good sized already. Just down the road about a mile or 2 from our cabin. He said, yeah, everybody be aware. I usually walk my dog up there, but not last week. I did not. You run into a pod of a mama and 3 little ones, you're in trouble. And so we're kind of watching out for that now. And that's a new thing for us up on Stemple, grizzly bears. I'm going to say new the last 10 years. We never had grizzlies when we were kids growing up. We had black bears. We didn't have many lions, although they were around. We definitely didn't have wolves. Introduction of the wolves changed everything from a hunting aspect. It changed everything, as well as the pests that came in and decimated the timberlands, all the beetles and bugs that decimated the forest lands, killed all the trees, spruce budworm, pine beetles and all that. There's so many dead trees, downfall, they're falling down now, the areas where elk used to like to live, where we could hunt, you could get through. You can't hardly get through there anymore, and the elk don't want to work that hard either. They're all pushed down into private land for the most part because of the downfall and the wolves. They got to be out where they can see that danger coming, because it's flight or fight for those elk and deer.
Speaking of animals, did you ever have any experiences or observations of wolverines?
Yes, we have wolverines up there. I've seen a couple. My buddy was a trapper for a while, and he trapped one. He's got it mounted on his wall. I know that's kind of a controversial thing anymore. It kind of was controversial for me as well. I have a lot of respect for all wildlife. Even the snake that slithers across the road in front of me, I try to avoid him. But he was a trapper, I wasn't. But yeah, we've had wolverines up there. We have martens up there. And it's neat to see those critters, or even their tracks. You know, when you go out and you got a little snow on the ground and you see those different tracks of all the critters that live out there that you're not aware of otherwise. So,
Thank you.
you bet, yes.
Can I get you to use the mic so we can hear your question on
Oh,
the recording?
okay. So your parents gave you kind of a wild rein growing up, and okay, but you did not do the same for your children, you had said earlier.
I'm sorry, what's that now?
Kind of freedom and a wild rein.
My kids are avid outdoors people. One lives on a ranch, the other one is a civil engineer, but avid hunter. Yes, I took my kids hunting, but I did not give them free rein with my vehicles when they were old enough to look through the steering wheel. That is just something I could not do. But yeah, they were up in the mountains a lot as they grew up as well, because I was still going, they were living at home too. And the ranch life that we had cattle drives, we had 2-day cattle drives twice a year from the Helena Valley, and this was up to Park Lake at first and back. We stopped at the Kleffner Ranch and put our cows in the corrals there, then the second day on up. And then once the ranch traded and sold that property to property up above York, Jumbo Basin, still a 2-day drive. So the kids had all of that in their lives. Some of the best memories my son talks about is his grandpa, who's passed on now, that there's a single file canyon going up above York, up Vigilante. If you folks had ever been up above York, and Vigilante Campground, and then you have to walk up the canyon for like 3.5 miles to the top end of it. Then it splits to the left in meadows, and then there's a single file canyon with sheer rock faces, hundreds of feet tall. I don't know how tall they are, but one horse or one cow can get through there at a time. So they got a single file up through the single file canyon to get through there. And my son was on horseback with his grandpa sitting there waiting for the cows to slowly get through there. Grandpa was singing an old cowboy song. He took some moss off a tree and made a mustache. My son never forgot that as he sat there. My son was a teenager when he did that. But those are the kind of memories. A typical weekend for us when our kids were growing up is we'd get off work and we'd have most of our gear loaded up. We'd run home, hook up a horse trailer, load up the horses. We had 4 horses, one for each one of us, and get our food and everything, get the kids in there. And it took us about an hour to get from our house up to Jumbo Basin. And there was an old cabin there we could have stayed in, or we'd set up a wall tent. I preferred the wall tent, and we all slept in that. And then the next morning we'd get up, breakfast of course, whatever, and get our horses all ready for all 4 of us, and do whatever needed to be done. There was fencing to be done. There was pastures to change cattle from one pasture to another, just checking on fences, putting salt out I had made salt packs for my Decker pack outfit. I could haul 2 blocks of salt on each side with one strap. It was easy to load and easy to take off, put salt out. We got all done with our work, our chores for the day on Saturday, go back to camp, turn the horses out, grab our fishing poles and 22s, and spend the rest of the weekend enjoying the great outdoors of Montana, fishing and gopher shooting or whatever. Sunday afternoon when we got home, took care of the horses first. My dad instilled that in us, in me especially. He said, you don't work your horse any harder than you have to, and you take care of him first before you sit down for dinner. So I take care of my horses, get them turned out, take care of the horse trailer. It had to be cleaned and put away and everything else. And we tucked those kids in bed. It was still light on a Sunday evening. There was no whining from those kids that it was still light out, that they were in bed. They were ready for bed. And I talked to them, and I said, think about all the things we got to do this weekend. The work things that were fun to begin with, you know, the horse riding and moving cows and all that. And they learned to be pretty good horse riders following their mom and I around. Because when you're chasing cows and moving cows, you got to be thinking ahead where they're going to go and get them cut off. And so those kids, they got to be pretty good riders, keeping up with their mom and I. And I said, yeah, we got to ride horses. We got to do all this. We got to go fishing in the mountains. And he said, we are so blessed. Don't ever forget that, my children. Don't ever forget it. And they haven't. I know in my heart it is a true blessing to live that way, to raise your children that way. Never regret it. And their mom and I were ready for bed too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm from Helena also, and when you think about, let's say 1970 and 50 miles around town and 48 Willys Jeep, sometimes those old vehicles would conk out and there weren't a lot of people around them. Did you ever have an experience where you're sitting there thinking, what do I do now?
No, not with that old Jeep. It never failed us. My younger brother, however, the smart one, the chemical engineer, however, he wasn't quite as good a driver as my older brother and I. I found out later that he's the only one that tipped that little Jeep over on its side. And then him and Todd, we know who Todd is. He worked for the Historical Society years back. They had to lift that Jeep uphill to get it back on its wheels. And it didn't do anything to the Jeep. It might have dinged the door a little bit. And I think they must have had help too, prying that thing back up and then checking the oil, and hey, yeah, let's go home. No big deal. But we had that Jeep on retrievals. In those days, there was old mine roads down through the timber and logging roads, and we chained that little Jeep up on all four. There wasn't any snow on the ground, but the bear grass was just slick as slick on those side hills. And there'd be times you had to get around a tree or whatever. You might chain a lodge pole to the front bumper where you could. And a couple guys would hang on to the upper hillside so that Jeep wouldn't tip over. And you'd get around that bad spot. Then you'd take that off and you'd get around whatever. And then you get to the elk that you're trying to retrieve. The driver stayed in the Jeep. The other guys hoisted it up. It was a half cab with a little box. So you hoisted the elk, several guys in the back of that Jeep, tucked the legs in, hooked the head back, and then the driver isn't getting out unless he crawls out the window. And a lot of times you had to winch and winch and winch to get up off those side hills. That's the way we grew up. There was a lot fewer people out there hunting, a lot fewer people using the resource. But there wasn't many elk. There was a lot fewer elk than there is today. The agency has done a really good job of managing the resource and bringing elk herds back, especially bull elk. You know, the Elkhorn is managed for that. The Sebin district is managed for big bulls. But even in the forest lands itself, they made it branch bull only. And I quit telling people how many elk we harvested. There were several of us guys hunting out of our cabin, but we were hunters. We weren't elk chasers. And we'd get 2 or 3 bulls every year and split it up amongst all the families, whatever. The best memories I have is looking back, my horses with half an elk on each one, the antlers on one maybe, or somebody carrying the antlers. If somebody's there that wants to carry them, I don't like putting antlers on my horses. There's just so many wrecks and horses get ruined. But looking back up the drainage and you see those horses coming with an elk on, and everybody's got the woolies on, and there's a foot of snow on the ground. Everybody's happy. What great memories for a kid that loved to be in the outdoors and loved the ranch life, loved the hunting and the fishing and the blessing of it all.
And I guess I also remember you really didn't have to ask permission to go and hunt on anybody's property. It's like, go get rid of them, they're a nuisance.
Well, we always stayed away from private land. We hunted on national forest land up in this Temple area, the Lincoln area, and that was one of the reasons. Well, we had our cabin up there, so we didn't have to go on private land. Married into the ranch was always open to hunting in the beginning, but then there was always users that had abused that privilege, and they'd leave gates open. It would take us usually a week or so to gather up all the cattle on national forest and bring them in onto the private land. And all somebody has to do is open a gate and leave it open, and all the cattle go back out. And you just spend a week riding. So you have to get back up there, round it all back up. Or they would go in and shoot a deer, let's say, instead of just walking over and retrieving, they'd tear up the hillside. So over time, it got to be hunting only by permission, and then hunting only for the folks that helped us brand or helped us fence. So it slowly closed down because of the few bad actors. It was just a few bad actors, and that's too bad. And then, of course, the big landowners came in and started buying big tracts of land, and no hunting. Hunting, pay to hunt. Yeah, and I'll never do that. So anyway, it kept me in Helena, kept me in Montana all my life. I've been to Alaska a few times. My brother, the smart one's up there right now. He just moved back. He retired as a chemical engineer. His wife got a job up there and moved back. But he arranged a fishing trip for my 2 children and all my grandkids and my wife and I to go up this summer to go fishing on the Kenai River down at Soldotna. If anybody's been up there. Keith and Jane own Beaver Creek Cabins and Guide Service. And brother knows him, so that's where we stayed. And the fishing was unbelievable. The regulators stopped commercial fishing in the ocean for the red salmon because they were killing too many kings. The king salmon run with the reds, and any other fish other than the red, the commercial fisherman has to throw back in. And dead, they're dead. They're catching them in a gill net kills them. And so the king fisheries was decimated. This year, they have a sonar cable on the bottom of that river to keep track of the fish. They try to get 600,000 to 700,000 coming up that river typically on a good year. This year they had 3.5 million fish come up that river. We could catch 6 fish for each one of us. There was 10 of us fishing up there, that my kids and grandkids. What a great time for these. I have little grandkids that are, 8, 10 years old, and seeing those kids catch those 10-pound salmon, it was fun. My granddaughter, who is 16, 17, she is adamant about everything. Straight A student, best in sports you can imagine. She was fishing with all her energy, and she was keeping the pole up in the air too high, and it's bent right down. She broke one of his fishing poles, a $400 fishing pole. And Keith said, hey, that's part of doing business. She went to the bank the next day. Her mother took her and came back and handed Keith $400. I broke it. I bought it. That was my granddaughter. But we came home with 300 pounds of fish. We could have brought home 600 pounds. We didn't need that much. But we fished, we caught our limit the first day, and then the next day we just fished and caught and released. We saw Alaskan brown bear right by our camp. We saw caribou meander through one afternoon. My brother always said, he said, don't step out on the porch or anywhere until you look to see if there's a bear, no matter where you're at. He lives in Anchorage, and we stayed with him a couple nights, my wife and I did. And in the backyard of the neighboring condo, there was 2 black bears in the middle of the day playing, frolicking. But grizzlies can be anywhere there too, wherever. But if I was a younger man, I think I'd be living in Anchorage or in Alaska. Just love it. It's just the smell of the air. I don't know if I can relate this clear enough, but I'm going to try. There was a boardwalk that went down to this man's docks and boat that we used to go fishing. And it's over this little swampy area, and he had a bench sitting out there. And I went out there right early morning. And there had already been 5 people go out fishing at 5:30, so it was about 5:30 in the morning. And the sun hadn't come up yet, and there was fog. And as the sun came up, the fog started to lift, and you could pick out those little scrub spruce trees like sentinels across this little backwater. And the birds started coming to life on the lower river. We're miles up from the mouth of the river, 3 or 4 miles. And the bird life was coming to life. It was getting louder and louder. There was an eagle's nest right there in a cottonwood tree. The young were just start getting their wings and flying. The adult bald eagle came in and landed, and then those young were just squawking and carrying on. And all the squawking from the birds on the river down there. And that's the sun. I just shut my eyes and took it all in. Clear blue sky after that fog lifted. We had 4 days without a cloud in the sky in Alaska. That's being looked after. that doesn't happen. And so we had a wonderful time there, and we had one bad day, so we went over to Whittier, where the tunnel goes over. And the military put that tunnel in during World War II. It was a deep sea port that never froze, so they bored that big tunnel. One-way direction of traffic, and a train goes through there also, and so we did that one day. A great trip. Anybody gets a chance to go to Alaska, if you like the outdoors, like to fish. My son, talked to him today. He said, Dad, I'm getting a hold of Gary to get a fishing trip lined up for next year, but just a long weekend. We spent a week up there. It was a fabulous time. One other thing I want to say about that trip, the first evening after fishing, what are we going to have for dinner? We each have barbecues by our cabins. We got 3 cabins there. So we're going to have salmon. So we had it, and we didn't have anything to spice it up but McCormick steak seasoning. And we put that on there, and we cooked it on the barbecue. It was excellent. The little kids even came back for seconds. We all loved it. Of course, we had salad and everything go with it. The second day, what are we having for dinner? Well, we've got to have salmon. They said, I don't want any of that day-old salmon. I want fresh salmon caught today. Oh, it was so good. And yeah, we've been eating salmon ever since. And it's so healthy for you, for a guy that has heart issues anyway. So life is grand. Take advantage of it. Don't ever quit.
See, also back in the 70s, all us kids had motorcycles, and we drive all around town. Were you strictly a horse person, or did you ride motorcycles?
Oh, no. Horses didn't come into my life until later. Maybe you saw me running around town in my homemade dune buggy. It was like a 1950 Ford sedan. Body was gone, the frame was shortened, and I was in welding school then, so I welded up this roll cage over it. It's a flathead V8, and I took a piece of sheet metal for the dash, mounted the steering column on it. The seat went back in, a 20-gallon barrel on the back for a fuel tank, piece of railroad rail for the bumper, because otherwise it was too light, couldn't do anything. We'd hang our packs on that thing and run around town or head for the mountains. We had so much fun in that old thing. It was the stupidest, funniest looking thing you can imagine. Cops never bothered us. We put lights on it, and we used hand signals, and we didn't get crazy. And the cops left us alone. You know, in those days, you cruised up and down Helena, Main Street. All the kids parked along there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's,
remember that.
yeah, good memories, folks. Living in Montana, living in Helena, Main Street town. Our folks managed the Placer Hotel up on Main Street back in those days. They managed the food department. So we got to work in the kitchen of the Placer Hotel growing up. We were dishwashers. We worked with the yard lady. She was the gal that took care of all the salads, the potatoes, and all that kind of stuff. We helped her. We helped in big parties, carrying food back and forth, doing dishes. What a great experience. A lot of people, a lot of those folks in the restaurant industry are kind of transient. They come and go. After Dad retired, he'd take a road trip down to New Mexico where one brother was living. He'd take the bad roads, they probably were, the back roads. And he'd stop at every little coffee shop along the way. He'd ask the waitress, who's in the back? Who's cooking? Who owns this? And every so often he'd run into somebody that worked for him at the Placer Hotel in Helena, Montana. He could go anywhere and talk to people and find connections. That was just, and I was never that person. I was never the person that would sit up here and talk like this my entire life till I got to the point where I got tired of it. I saw what my dad, what a people person he was. And I prayed to my Lord, take this apprehension away from me, and I'm forcing myself to be out here. It's not easy. The only thing I have to talk about is my life. That's the only thing I know. And, or welding. But what a grand time it all has been. And just like, I'll read these. I don't think I read these excerpts in the back of my book yet. Maybe I did. I'll read them again, though. Knocking the gun away, running into the bank, leaving a trail of blood behind, not realizing he had been shot. That was my father. Heading into the bog marshal wilderness with a pack horse in tow. With my rope stretched tight across the swollen creek, me on one side, the calf on the other. That's a Kodak moment. Now I'm on foot, and the calf, I roped it jumped this big creek, went out the other side, and I'm braced, and I don't know if he's going to pull me in or not, but that's how it came about. Crosshairs at the top of his back, the buckskin butt patch fills my scope. Prying eyes might find this a la naturel, refreshing ourselves in the cool waters of a high mountain lake. And that's kind of misleading. Those high mountain lakes were never cool. They were outright cold. Yes, they are. A collection of true life adventures, tall tales with a few out-and-out lies thrown in just for fun. And I might mention, at the beginning of each story, there's a little kind of animated sketch of a horse. And there's 3 versions of that horse. One is just a horse standing there looking at you. The second version is he's winking at you. And the third version, he's got his tail up and he's pooping. It gives you a little hint to how much literary license I added to that story. Even though every story is based on true people and true events, some I just had to make up a whole story around it. And so that was so fun. And the last quote here on the back, oh, what a grand adventure it all has been. Growing up and old, running the mountains along the Continental Divide, just outside the smoky little village of Lincoln, Montana. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ron, for being here. So if anyone would like to purchase the book, go over and visit Allie, and then I'm sure Ron would be happy to talk to you if you want to come up here. If anyone wants to come up
Oh,
and ask
sure,
questions.